Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. I think it's the third agriculture-focused session this morning, and we've deliberately aligned them all sequentially so that people with an interest in agriculture don't have to make unpleasant choices between which agriculture session to sit in. So this session is organised by the FAO. I'm delighted to have been invited to moderate. And essentially the point of this session is to help present to you the FAO's roadmap for SDG 2, with reaching SDG 2 within 1.5 degrees. And the reason that this roadmap, I think, is so important. Voila. There's still seats around the table if you'd like one. But the reason that this roadmap, I think, is so important, I'm not an agriculture expert, so I read my talking points with some alarm, to be very honest, because in 2022, so 2 years ago, almost 740 million people went hungry. 590 million people will still be hungry in 2030. Not exactly what we're aiming for under SDG 2. And at the same time, as we well know, the planet is in crisis. What was a climate change concern is a climate change crisis. We're exceeding the safe limits in 6 of 9 planetary boundaries, many of which are tied to the agricultural food system. And the agricultural food system is also responsible for 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So the dilemma, it seems, couldn't be starker. Right? What do? Do we produce more now to address hunger, but endanger the climate even further? Or do we curb production to reduce emissions and save the planet, but thereby endanger food security and nutrition? And it is the ultimate invidious choice. But so to help governments think through, I think, these challenges, and to help shape a path to concrete actions, the FAO has launched this global roadmap, which aims to thread the needle, if I've understood correctly. Can we achieve SDG 2 and stay under the 1.5 degree threshold agreed at COP28? So this report, I think, is rooted in the urgency of both of those situations and the very difficult dilemma, it would seem, that we have to choose from. But it shows, I think encouragingly, that a joint agenda is not only absolutely essential, but it is also possible. And in a world where everything seems very difficult, that's encouraging. So the objective is clear: providing good food for everyone today and tomorrow. So the roadmap, which will be presented by David Laborde from the FAO, presents a comprehensive strategy that spans activities, I gather, during the next 3 years. So it's stuff we should be doing right now. And it encompasses a very diverse portfolio of solutions. It's organized across clean energy, crops, fisheries and aquaculture, food loss and waste, forests, healthy diets, livestock, soil and water, and data and other policies. There are milestones in it suggested to help us track progress towards and along this joint agenda over the next 3 years. Partly to track progress and partly, interestingly, to foster accountability, which is another pet issue of mine in the government policy world. So it's something that I think speaks to the governments in the room, to the organisations like mine who consider it their job to help governments work their way through these dilemmas, and also to help to keep them accountable to the commitments that they make to make the world a better place. So, David, you're going to walk us through the roadmap. I have a few probing questions to put to you at the end. I won't ask too many of them, and then we'll leave a good amount of time for discussion and questions afterwards. Super. Go ahead, David.
Thanks a lot, Alice, and thanks everyone for being here, especially if you have to compete with your lunch.
Lunch comes next, you're fine.
Okay, so
yeah,
good.
Yeah.
But, you know, actually, and that's a sad transition, because if for us is when are we going to eat, for too many people on Earth is are we going to have lunch or dinner today? And I think that, you know, we see clearly that we have some huge challenges in terms of food security and nutrition. And one of maybe my starting point will be a lot of the things I'm going to discuss today. Potentially you have heard about it even 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This idea of actually linking the climate agenda with the food security agenda is not totally new. And even I will say linking this to the trade and trade agenda is not new. Me, I remember more than I think 15 years ago when at the time Pascal Lamy was saying we need to link Doha to Bali. That was actually, you know, the Doha trade talks and the Bali climate talks. 15 years after, we are still trying to do it. But actually, the situation is worse than 15 years ago. That's what I'm going to show. But also, something like COVID has really changed the mind of, I think, many governments, but also people. You know, food security is not just a concern for poor people on the other side of the planet. Many countries are rethinking, you know, what it means to have good food and nutrition for their population, what level of coordination you need across countries, and what will be the threat of tomorrow, because the threats are not actually disappearing. And since 2015, when we launched actually the Agenda 2030, we have not really made progresses on the planet front. As Alice has said, we have today 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries that are broken. In 2015, it was 4. So in the last 9 years, we have not moved in the right direction. The NDCs today are not even bringing us to a 1.5 degree world. We will need to do more. And a 1.5 degree world is not already a victory in itself. It's damage control. We will need a lot of adaptation in a 1.5 degree world. Actually, human agriculture that we know for the last 10,000 years have never operated in this planet. The last time we were as hot as we are going to be even in less than 10 years from now was 100,000 years ago. So we are really putting a lot of pressure on our system. And I will say beyond 1.5, beyond 2 degrees, we have to be extremely careful about how much we will be even able to manage. The level of uncertainties, of non-linearity that we are dealing with are, I don't want to be too alarmist, but they are striking. The Gulf Stream can shift. If you already talk with fishermen today, they start to see things in pattern. If the permafrost starts to unfreeze, we are going to free a lot of CO2 and even pathogen agents. So we don't want to go too far, and we still have a window of opportunity to act. And my second point about the roadmap is this. You know, we have seen why on climate action things have been delayed, and we have this 4D. You know, first it was denial, doesn't exist. Now it exists. Then we have division. You try to oppose people. Then distraction. You focus on a very small issue and you may try to make it big without really starting to tackling the big question. And today we have doomism. Oh, it's too late. With the roadmap, we try to say no. On both climate and food security, we can get rid of this 4D because we have solutions. It's not too late. It's going to be costly, politically, financially, but it's not if you have the choice. Okay? And sometimes, you know, yes, maybe one technology is going to help, but we should not focus just on thinking that one technology is going to save us all. Most of the actors have to do something. It's not just, you know, one sector. It's not just livestock that have to do everything. Everyone in the value chain, everyone in the system will have to do something. On the food security, and just if we look hunger, that's not better. Before COVID-19, we still had 612 million people that are in chronic hunger, so people that on a regular basis doesn't have enough calories to operate properly. And of course, it has increased with COVID-19, but actually since 2017, we have this upward trend due to conflict, due to climate change, and sometimes all of these are feeding each other, meaning that climate change and conflict appear in the same location, sometimes they cross-fertilize, unfortunately. And in the background, you have economic inequalities. And these shocks themselves have increased inequalities. COVID-19 has made a lot of rich people richer, or at least with more savings, and a lot of poor people poorer, or with more debt. Climate change, the same thing. We know how it impacts people unequally. And so if you combine high level of inequalities across countries And within countries and these shocks, you get this. And what we see that in our projection, we are not going to recover. So right now, as I say, by 2030, we still 600 million people in chronic hunger. And beyond hunger, we have this question of, can we have healthy diets? And here also, basically today, we have 3 billion people that cannot even afford healthy diets. And so that's number coming from the SOFI report of FAO, but we have also this year the SOFA report that talk about the hidden cost of the food system. And the picture here is that we have at least 10% of the global GDP that is lost or associated with hidden cost of the agri-food system. Environmental cost, health cost. The fact that we have a population that doesn't have healthy food means the population is not productive. Even if we don't think about the human right aspect, and we should not forget there is a right to food, so we cannot forget these 600 million people that will still not have this basic right by 2030. The fact that today we have not healthy food, it's costly for the taxpayer already as a public system, but also there is an hidden cost that everyone are facing. So there is a strong motivation to do something, and the clock is ticking, and that's basically the idea behind the roadmap. And so we try to be an integrated approach, so to connect the different elements. That's a request that came from both public and private actors. Large-scale investors have asked us to look at this, to do something like the International Energy Agency has done about decarbonizing the energy sector. But the goal is not to decarbonize the agri-food system. The goal here is to make sure the agri-food system can deliver on this mission, that is feeding everyone in a good manner. That's why we have an agri-food system, but to do it in a way that will not compromise the climate agenda, but maybe more important, will not compromise the future of food security. Because agriculture is the main victim of climate change. So if we don't do something on climate change, and agriculture and food system have to contribute, they will also be the same victim. And today, you see that how this political economy is complex even for farmers. If you ask the farmers to do too many change, they don't want, but at the same time, they know that they are suffering from more drought, they are suffering for more shift in pest and disease, and so we need to unlock this situation. So this is a global roadmap, so it's an harmonized framework, but it has to be contextualized, and that's actually what we start to do. It also builds on this idea coming from the UN food system that we need a food system thinking. So, and for us at FAO, it's an agri-food system thinking, because we also use agriculture for non-food use. And that's not going to disappear, because the more we decarbonize the whole economy, the more we phase out from fossil fuel, the world will still need carbon change. And it will come from biomass. And this biomass will have to come from agriculture, aquaculture, and so on. So it's not like if we can say, we just have to produce food. No, we have to do many things, and we just have one amount of land. But if you just talk about system, people get lost. You need at one point to be more practical, and a lot of ministers, a lot of firms still operate within the sectors. We are in charge of livestock. So we need to know what we want to do for livestock. But livestock cannot be thought in deconnection of the rest. And for us, it was really the starting target here is the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and the Ministry of Environment, to stop having them fighting against each other, but more making a coalition, and actually to ask more money to the Ministry of Finance, and to make a business case for why the Ministry of Finance will invest in this. And as we can see, is actually even in terms of mitigation, agriculture can be a very efficient way to reduce emission. But today, if you look at climate finance, you just have 4% going to agriculture. 4%. When it's 1/3 of the agri-food system is 1/3 of the emission. Ministry of Trade and Foreign Affairs also have to play a role, because as we are going to see, international coordination, both through trade and international aid, is going to be important. Because if we don't address some of the key inequalities and the key of the imbalances, we will not make it. And of course, the private sector. And last but not least, is to be inclusive from the different actors, because also, if we don't tackle the inequalities within the system, we will not solve these problems. And why the UN and why the FAO? Because we have some technical capacity as a technical agencies, but also some legitimacy to engage with various stakeholders on that. So you will see the short version, 50-page report on the website. You have an interactive story. In March, you will have a larger report that talks more about the theory of change and go more in some details. But today I'm going to give you this snapshot. And we presented at COP28, so in Dubai 3 months ago. And from this, and this global vision, and right now we have a lot of feedbacks, mostly positive from different actors. Some people say you don't go far enough. Some people say you are going too far. The point is at least to have a discussion and to acknowledge also that even if we have 2 years to redirect some of the narrative and some of the thinking, we are starting to do something that will take 15 years. Okay? We are not changing large-scale policies overnight. Things have to be incremental, but at least we have to move in the right direction, what we have not really done so far. Now, some countries have made progresses, some countries are already moving in the right direction, but sometimes not quickly enough, or just sometimes not coordinated enough. And so the idea for us is to get this global vision, to start to add more element on costing and financing this year, but also we start to have regional dialogue and country dialogue, and in COP30 to have a number of country action plans, and that link to other initiatives launched at COP, like the technical cooperation collaborative mechanism that is designed to get some support for some country to implement this type of thinking and analysis, but also the convergence initiative that try to put together the effort done for the National Food System Dialogue, the NDCs, the NAPs, and all of these to support the leader declaration that we had at COP about making sure that agri-food systems are fully integrating in the climate strategy. Now, just on the previous screen, what I want to add is the very nice feedback we had more recently is it's not only some global initiative, regional initiative, or country initiative that want to think about the roadmap as a common framework and common language. We start also to see cities, large cities. Because as I said, everyone will have to do something. And we have very different level of governance. And some actions have to be taken by governments, and some actions have to be taken or already taken by large cities. For example, New York, how you deal with your public food procurement, how you deal with other initiatives that you have in terms of clean energy, how they are integrated. Because we cannot ask government to do everything. And so this question, of which type of action for which level of governance, where do we need international collaboration, government to government, or as we see with large cities, cities to cities, also sharing experience, sharing knowledge. It's pretty important because they need to see also success story in order to bring a good story and a good change at home. Because sometimes people say, is it going to work? I don't want to take the risk. So we have 6 key messages: the need to act urgently and to change the narrative. So that I think at this stage you may already have the justification. Food security and nutrition is an essential human right and also a priority for countries. Very few countries, and I think even none, will say, I'm going to sacrifice the food security and nutrition of my population for the climate target. So we have to show how climate action will contribute to food security and nutrition. And that's true for government, that's true for farmers. When I started my career and I was in Costa Rica, I hear a farmer that explained me a lot of things, and he told me, I like my trees, and I like a lot of the payment that we have in Costa Rica for that. But if I have to choose between sending my daughter to university and cutting the tree, I cut the tree. Okay? So that, at one point, this basic trade-off that we should remember, people will take decisions for people first, the planet after. What we have to go is to go beyond that and show where we can have win-win. But today, because we have so many silos, so many agendas that are disconnected, we have a lot of trade-off and not so much synergy. Because each individual action is always going to create winners and losers. And you will rarely get a coalition on just a couple of actions. You need to come with a portfolio. That's the idea of the roadmap. A critical mass of action together that will make sure that everyone gets something in order to get the political economy solved. Now, just transition is very important for climate action, but it's critical for this debate, because if we don't address inequalities, we will not solve the food security and nutrition problem. As I said before, today we have 740 million people that are in hunger. Basically, half of them is due to within-country inequalities, and half of them is due to across-country inequalities. So that will have to be addressed. Solutions exist, but international coordination is a necessity. In order to organize the narrative, we have 10 domains of action for a total of 120 actions. In each domain, you have actions that have a number, but they are not ranked. So don't think that action 1 is more important than action 2, because this really depends on where you are. And it doesn't mean that every country, every government has to do the 120. Some of them are irrelevant in some context. But that's the space you want to think about, and 20 milestones. And what we want is this. So here you see in dark red the number of undernourished people, and if we still want to target SDG 2, we want to get it done by 2030. Going to be challenging, but even if we don't do it in 2030, we can still make it, do it by 2035. So the roadmap lesson doesn't change. But then you have the orange part, that is the number of people that cannot afford healthy diet. So you don't have the economic means to have a healthy diet. But then we have the upper part, that the people that have the economic means of having a healthy diet and don't consume today the healthy diet. That's bad for their health, and as you know, over-consuming food also increases your environmental footprint. And these different people are in different locations, but also require different policy actions. You will not solve the problem of people having too many ultra-processed food or fat foods every day than the people that doesn't have enough. Now, this is the emission pattern, and here also what we see that with the set of action we have, you have on this part here the gross emission of the agri-food system. Here you have the sequestration that is right now mainly through forest, but at one point we can start to also sequestrate carbon in soil. And you also see that here you have things related to livestock that will decrease, and so that will be important for the methane pledge, but they will not disappear. So livestock is not going to disappear, and even with the best technology, we will not have a carbon zero livestock. And livestock is important for nutrition. If in some place of the world people are consuming too much animal product, in other parts, not enough. To get micronutrients to kids in Africa, the best way is milk, eggs, and meat. It's not biofortified cereals. Now, if you're in California, that's a different ballgame. But we have also to accept it, and we have 15 years. And so that's where some technology are not going to be scaled up in some place of the world, so we have to build on what we have. And also that pastoralist communities are, in many cases, vulnerable ones, so we are not going to say, okay, disappear because your cows produce methane. No, you want their cows to be more efficient, and they can produce more food for less methane if we invest in them. But also the agri-food system use a lot of, still manually doing deforestation, so we have to get rid of deforestation. But also it's consuming energy, and having cleaner energy at the economy-wide level will help the agri-food system to reduce emission. Because 1/4 of this emission from the agri-food system come from burning fossil fuel as a source of energy. But the agri-food system themselves are not going to shift the energy mix of a country. So that's why we always need this interaction, but at the same time, biomass can be part of some pathway for decarbonizing. So that, you know, all this complexity we try to bring. Now, as I said, we have one principle that is a just transition, but will lead to two guiding implementation ideas. One is, even if we have a problem of redistribution and inequalities, one pathway to solve it is to improve efficiency, improve productivity. But we really need to improve productivity in places that are lagging behind today. Smallholders around the world are very far from the technological frontier. And that has an economic cost for them, and that also has an environmental cost for them. Per unit of milk, a cow in Ethiopia emits 15 times more emission than a cow in Switzerland. So, right now, intensive system in the global north with better genetics, better feed, are very efficient environmentally per unit of output. We need to bring this technology in the global south, because then you have huge capacity. We have 80 million cows in Ethiopia. So there's a lot of saving to do if we invest in them. Same thing in Latin America. So bringing better technology, better genetics will be good for the world, good for the local farmers, and help achieving multiple targets. And at the same time, we reduce inequality. So the thing is not to cut technology in one place and increase it in the other, it's to increase it more quickly in the places that are lagging behind, and where also the demand is going to grow. The meat demand is going to grow in Africa. So if you don't invest there, you will start to see problems. And global rebalancing. And global rebalancing is also where the trade agenda will take place. We have some places in the world that are using too much fertilizer or too much pesticide. And other places not enough today. So we will need, for example, to get less fertilizer in some parts of Asia, more in Africa. Same thing for meat consumption. We have part of the world that are consuming too much meat, even just based on the national scientific standard. It's not a few people coming to lecture others. No, your own medical expert, your own nutritionist say, you are consuming too much meat. Just converse to what your own science is saying, and that's true in Europe, that's true in North America, but at the same place, that will create space for consumption in the global south. And during this transition mechanism, trade is going to be very important, because it's not overnight that all the costs in Ethiopia are going to be efficient. But if you cut production in the north, and you don't increase production sustainably in the south, you will have a problem. So at one point, you may cut consumption in the north, increase export from the north, to address the needs of the global south, while at the same time, you still need to invest in the global south. So all of these pieces have to be addressed. Just one will not make it. And that's where you can get the political enemy right, because you can say, oh, you are losing one market, you are gaining another. But unfortunately, the incentives today are not there at the national level and even globally. If you think about how the NDCs are built, the NDCs have not been built thinking about agri-food system. They have been built about energy system. So basically, you are counting emission where you burn fossil fuel. Food is very different. We are not counting emission where we burn food, where we put it in our belly. It's where we produce. So countries that have NDCs, in particular agricultural exporters, doesn't have the right incentives, because most of the pressure they have is about feeding the world. So we need to make sure also we have a better incentive system to make sure that the country making the effort are rewarded. So that's our 10 domains. So livestock, it's an important one, a lot of emission, but also big nutrition aspect, and it's a source of livelihood for billion people on Earth. We have, of course, crops. Fisheries and aquaculture will be very important, because that also you can get healthier diets with a low emissions. You also have interaction, because if you start to feed your livestock with some seaweeds, you can start to reduce emission. So we have this interaction that matters, and you can still get the fisheries and aquaculture also using a cleaner energy and a number of things. But beyond these three big production sectors, you have two where natural resource management will be important: forest and wetlands, and soil and water. So it's about better using natural resources, but also in some cases getting integrated production system, agroforestry, or paludiculture, because we will need to restore some natural environment, but we will also need to value them in economic terms, if you want, in particular local communities and indigenous people to benefit from that. Finally, you have clean energy, very important. So already, still unfortunately today, we have too many people that use traditional biomass as a source of energy for cooking in Africa, that contribute to deforestation, that have health impact. So rural electrification and renewable electrification will be important, but more generally, how we decarbonize the whole system and how much biomass we need, and with which technology to avoid the type of biofuel versus food competition needs to be actively managed. In our roadmap, we are fully aligned with the IEA roadmap. But let's say that the next 10 years, 15 years are going to be challenging, especially about some of the underlying assumptions regarding biofuel in the IEA roadmap. Then we have the question of food loss and waste. That's going to be important, but it's something that will already occur all along the value chain. And the question of enabling healthy diet, so really thinking about how we can shift consumer behavior through better education, better information, nudges, but better regulation. And in some cases, you will see the question of having improved labels. And so that's where we will have another pathway linked to the trade agenda. And inclusive policies and data will be key. So inclusive policy, you have a number of things regarding social safety net in terms of sort of de-risking. But today, we lack data actually to make all of this possible. That can be gender-specific data. That can be about measuring carbon emission at the farm level. Because if you don't do it, how you are going to get certification? How you are going even to get farmers on board to understand if they make efforts, they will get benefit from it. That's, very basic question, but today we are still not there, and we need that. For each domain, you will see this type of description, a number of action, and larger report that can contribute. So we have tried to make this interactive story easy to navigate. But all of this, I've said, will have to be contextualized, because we operate in different socio-economical space, but also agroecological zones and biophysical. The same technology will behave differently on different soil. Also, the costs are going to be different. What is the cost of skilled labor versus unskilled labor? How much you need to compensate depending on initial property rights on land or water. And finally, the political cost also can be different. So here we don't always want to go for the best. We want to go for the good. And we need to make sure that we start to move now and in the next 5 or 10 years, and don't wait 10 years to find an agreement to start doing something. If we start to act in 10 years, it's too late. And so that's why we have more and more dialogue at the local system. So in terms of accountability, we have these 20 milestones that are not covering everything. And we don't want also to duplicate even the SDG, trying to get 100 indicators. No, we want to get 20 things. If we don't do this, that's the necessary but not sufficient condition. If we don't do this globally, we will not get what we have. And what you see is clearly targets in terms of deforestation, need of making clear that we have some indicators or some measurement solved. We also, for example, here have a target on gender about something we already measure today, so we are not saying, because sometimes we have seen we define indicators that we don't have, and so like the SDG, we need 10 years to start to measure them to know that we are not on track. No, let's build on what we have. It's not perfect, but that's a start. But importantly, we have targets in terms of productivity. If we don't achieve sustainable productivity, globally and in particular in low-income countries, also we will not make it. So really the thing is, let's stop to oppose productivity with sustainability. The two are interlinked. And then we have these outcomes that are linked to the first graph. So just to now conclude on a few things and to start the discussion on trade is, there are a few topics that I think are highly relevant for some of the discussions that are taking place at the WTO. Is first the question on subsidies, and that's the link with the repurposing agenda and how we are going to, on one hand, to manage green subsidies that we have seen, like in the renewable energy sector. So we know that we need to spend more money on agri-food systems. I think that I'm not going to add it. So it's not just moving the money we have around. We will need to spend more, but also we need to make sure we are not going to spend it in a way that will create more problems or more problems for your neighbor, or actually increase the inequality we have talked about. So that's going to be important. This rethinking of subsidies are taking place within some of this sectoral bubble, and in some cases across the bubble. So you can still spend money on your livestock sector. And actually, in many cases, you have to spend more money on your livestock sector. But you can do it in a smarter way. That's going to be important. In some cases, maybe you need to take the money from the livestock producers and move it to the animal product consumers. If you really want your kids to get more milk at school, but it's not by subsidizing your dairy industry that you get there. It's by making sure that you have good school meal programs. So that we know this question. Sometimes say, oh, we just need to produce. No, and we trade in any case. So the fact that you increase production in one place doesn't mean that you increase subsidies, consumption in the other. So you will see, for instance, that in a specific domain, you will see a narrative on food tax and subsidies, not only for primary production, but also processors. And I think, when we talk about healthy diet, the question about what is done in terms of food processing is very important. Where do we want to tax or subsidize? Better practices will be important to adopt technology. And similarly for inclusive policies, some of the subsidy money should be better targeting social safety net. And also we need to make sure that some of our agricultural and food policies are aligned with the healthy diet priorities and climate action. So that's the need for integrity. International coordination will be an important topic also that is part of these different elements that will lead to standards, to define common metrics, because if today, different economies start to have their own way to measure carbon and start to certify their farmers individually, we are sure that in 5-10 years we have a WTO case on that. When the science is relatively the same. And actually today we see a number of big players that still don't have these tools. And I think we'll be very interested even for economies of scale to put their money together to define this tool and standard to make sure that the farmers in the Midwest, in Germany, in New Zealand, or in South Africa have an easy solution to measure emission on their soil, on their things. Like the way that, for example, when we talk about soil health, 20 years ago it was very expensive. Now you have for $5,000 a kit that helps to take samples to start to do analysis of your soil in your farm. We can move in this direction if there's a critical mass of people that want to do it. But environmental norms and nutrition-related norms is going to be important. That will be important for labeling. And that's something the WTO could be proactive about. And finally, facilitating trade and knowledge, trade in goods. If we think about food loss and waste, there is actually a number of issues that were important, and we have seen during COVID-19 how it was through more capacity to move food more quickly. We were reducing losses and the reverse, but also more climate shocks is going to increase food loss and waste. Because we are going to see this large fluctuation of production due to climate change. And that's where trade is going to be important, because we are not going to stock everything. But trade is a way to adapt to climate change. And so making trade more efficient will be important, but a lot of the solution, both in terms of data and other elements, is going also to link to digitalization of agriculture, sharing data, sharing information on weather, number of things here that will be important, and also where the WTO has an agenda. But technological transfer, IP rights, is going to be also an issue. As we have seen in the health domain, when we start to see seeds that have specific patents linked to specific pests and disease, where do we draw the line about the commercial interest versus what is a matter of livelihood or even life in some case will be more and more important. And all of these questions are just going to accelerate based on the path of technology, based on the path of technological change, and the pressure we have from the food security situation. So, I talked a lot, but you see there was a lot of fun.
That was brilliant, David. I expected no less. But thank you, really interesting. And thank you for pulling out at the end the specific links to trade, right? The global rebalancing, the questions of labeling and standards and metrics, from measuring the impact of some of these products, of subsidies, what do we subsidize and how, and the question of how trade in goods in particular helps to move knowledge, right? And move technology and how that comes in as another thing. That was fascinating. I have so many questions, but I'm going to hold them on my chest and open the floor to anyone else. I'll take 3 at a time and then have David respond to them and then come back again. 1, 2. Super. 1, 2, 3, and then David can respond. Go ahead, please.
I have a quick question about, it's Dr. Adam Israel. I have a quick question about some of the assumptions that are made in the paradigm that you are suggesting. I'm just really struck by what happens in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, they have two very interesting phenomena. One is a big industry of growing vegetables and fruits. $32 billion on 2021, for example. And what they do is they really focus in very clean technology, hydroponic technology. They use wind and solar power, and they also use the water that they distill by using, in fact, solar and wind power. And this means that, in fact, their carbon footprint is very low, number one. Second thing, they're also a big expert of meat. They export meat to all around Europe. But then I'm not speaking about them as meat exporters. I'm speaking about the technologies of growing the vegetables that don't use the old ways of growing vegetables, etc., like what you're talking about in Africa. So one question is about how we can transfer this kind of technology so it would be more efficient. For example, in India, you have many entrepreneurs that are growing in the cities vegetables and so on, they sell it to restaurants and so on in a hydroponic way. So this is one item. The second item is there are many advancements in the way to produce synthetic meat that has got the same taste like regular meat that are made out of soy or wheat. And its carbon footprint is lower than the way we grow, in fact, regular meat, the cattle and so on. So this is the second point. And then the third point is, of course, if you go to most of these countries, they have plenty of wind or solar energy that they can use. And it's very, very cheap to use it, but still they don't use it. If you were to go, for example, to Namibia, they have excellent opportunities on using solar energy and so on, and also distilling water and clarifying the water that they use. Very cheap technologies that's not introduced there, and so on. And the last point, it's like 3 points. The last point, in fact, is we are speaking about subsidies and giving subsidies to the farmers and so on. It seems that the biggest obstacle is not really that, but because this is really the old school. We're speaking about, for example, the new technologies to be introduced there, literacy that will be introduced there, and diversification of their economy. So in this way, they have some chance to meet first SDG 2, but then also to decrease their carbon footprint. Now, these suggestions are out of the agenda of the paradigm that you suggested here, because in fact, I'm trying to reassess and examine the assumptions that we have, given the old stuff that we have, and I'm trying to think about out of the box and to see how the new technologies and our knowledge how we can transfer that in a very cheap way. So rather than changing the subsidies and the old way and doing it one way or another, just rethinking about how we introduce this type of knowledge how in terms of growing vegetables and so on, etc. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah, so this is, I'm sorry about this complex of question, but...
Not at all. I think it comes all back to the same question, right? How do we use new technologies to shift the way that some of this production works? Question at the back?
Pascal from Water Resource Institute. I think a great framework because we have the same framework.
So it's great.
One thing a little bit different, and well, it might be your framework, that was with my question. So we have to say efficiency, etc., but then we say it's about land sparing because land sparing. So we need to produce more food. We need to have more forests to suck up carbon. We need to have more land for biodiversity. We only have one globe. Doesn't work out, so we need to shrink agriculture footprint but increase efficiency. And so I was wondering, we have for the rest same because at all we work together. We have the same framework, but you haven't mentioned if that's part of your framework here. So that was only my clarifying question.
New technologies, land sparing. Chantaline.
Along the same line, but one is new technology and data, the link. So data democracy, how do we return back the data to the farmers as opposed to being the multinational that hold the data? Second is seaweeds, and it links to your 120 actions. I mean, clearly there are some of those, you said you can't rank them, and I understand, because it's a, got into a governmental process, but clearly some of them are more drivers and interconnected than the others, and it can advance, such as seaweed, that can advance gender equality, can advance food security, carbon sequestration, and others. And then perhaps just one last one, how do you see the rise in the interest for non-plastic substitute, which are mostly land-based, into your model?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Some
So,
small topics there.
I mean, the overall question of technology, so, if I had more time, I will enter in more detail, but this new technology, including about hydroponic, some integrated system we see in cities, even cultivated meat can be part of the solution. I think it really depends on the context. You are in Singapore, yes, you can do a lot of even refurbishing your factories to have a totally closed loop system of production. Doing this in the next 15 years in many places in Kenya at scale is not going to happen. Now, what we see is people are innovating, how even in a container, you can build small production units. And that will also be more resistant where there's a hurricane or things like this. So this innovation has to take place, clearly. Now, some of this technology, we have also to acknowledge that before being at scale globally will take 20, 25 years. It will be too late. So that's where I will say, let's make sure that we do this technology transfer, but some of them is about new technology that will still need to be adopted by, in particular, the upper middle income countries or the global north, because there is more investment, more capacity for the market to pay, more people that are ready to take risk. When existing technology today, if we already transfer them to the global south, will do a lot of things. Changing the genetics of cattle in Africa, good. Doing cattle vaccination in Africa, very good. We don't need to bring cultivated meat to already cut by half the emission of the cattle in Africa. That will be the next step. But also the cultivated meat, the carbon footprint depends on what is the source of energy. So if you bring cultivated meat in a place where the energy mix is still not clean, you don't achieve all of this, especially compared to chicken. Cattle is a bit different because red meat has so much methane that it's pretty competitive. And today, if you look at actually the energy mix in Netherlands, yes, there is some places where there's a lot of renewable, but you have a lot of greenhouses that are still burning natural gas. So, that's where we have to see things. But these technologies are going to be part of the solution. The question is how we can scale them up. And also, we have to invest today human capital for farmers. Yeah. That's about training. For me also, that having a new generation of PhD in agronomics, in a lot of science, in Africa, in other parts of the global south, because that's where the young generation is coming. And you are not going to wait people from the global north coming and to teach people all around the world. Part of the world is aging, part of the world you still have young generation. We need to invest in them. Because if we don't invest in them today, in 10 years, we are not there. Same thing for farmers. That's why also addressing gender inequalities in education is important. Half of the farmers in the world are women. They don't have the same education. How do we want them to have the same productivity? So that's why in the global roadmap, in inclusive policies, we are pointing this. Because just saying, we need to invest in the technology, but if we don't have the adoption capacity, we will miss it. And that's why we need this integrated agenda. Land sparing, yes. And in the roadmap, we quote actually work from the WRI. That's a big issue. So yes, we need to save lands. We need also, in some cases, to increase the efficiency about how we use the land with multi-functionalities. That's where, there is some wetlands that we need to protect today, and there is some wetlands that have been drained that need to become wet again. Can we do some paludiculture or other activities to make it? And also, can we diversify sometimes the income stream of some people operating in this land with payment for ecosystem services? So that's going to be important. But yes, we have limited amount of land. We want to use this land properly. And in the roadmap also, we, for example, separate a bit the narrative on gross deforestation versus net deforestation, because as soon as we take into account biodiversity, that's gross deforestation that matters. So, it's not just to say, can we capture a lot of carbon on this land by planting eucalyptus everywhere? Yes, we can, but that's not the system we want, because we are just shifting from one problem to another. Seaweed, yes, I think it is, but, and here also we see different speed of change. I would say also, if you are in a landlocked country, and you get, oh, you can feed your cattle with seaweed, people are less excited. Even if you can do, actually you can produce seaweed even without have access to, I mean, you can have integrated, I mean, Texas now is investing a lot on even aquaculture at 100 kilometers out of the coast, you know. You do these closed loop systems, but you still need energy, so where the energy is coming from and so on. Non-plastic substitute will be important also because if we want to actually maintain low level of food loss and waste, how we protect food is important. And today we have a system where we protect food with chemicals and plastic. So starting to say we get rid of chemical and plastic is just going to increase food waste. So we need this substitute. And that's where actually where we get this biomass. To get this carbon chain, that's the bioeconomy. And paving the way for a sustainable bioeconomy is critical. But that requires innovation, so that this question of IP rights. And the aspect on data is clear. That's one of the action in the data part, or inclusive policies, I think it's data part, about this ownership of data. Because right now you have farmers generating data, then after have to pay for using them. And that's going to be a major problem. Because as we have seen everywhere, farmer doesn't really get most of the benefits of what they do. They are in a very competitive framework, actually. So most of them are selling at their cost of production. They are not making big profits. And profits are captured by other parts of the value chain. There is asymmetry of power. There is different level of concentration between even the big input producers and the farmers, between the big supermarkets and the farmers. And we don't want to do the same thing for data. But that's where, I mean, it's so important to have government involved. Because they define the rules of the game, they can rebalance this asymmetry of power, and we want to level the playing field. Farmers are not going to do it, so we need government, and we need international coordination on that. Because we need to be able to share data, also to, even in the roadmap, we talk about early warning system, for instance, you know, what source of information we have, how we can predict. That's a global public good. I mean, globally, we are very happy to have 2, 3 different countries or group of countries predicting hurricanes. Because when one is wrong, we have other sources. Getting one monopoly of this, or one monopoly owned by private companies, will not be a good outcome. There is public good that have to stay public good and have to be paid by taxpayer money.
I can probably have 2 super quick questions. Maybe those are the 2 first hands I saw. 60-second questions, and then David has about 4 minutes to respond.
Thank you. I'm Hilde Gjenga from the Norwegian Farmers Union. And we import about 60% of what we eat on a cover basis in Norway, and we're still struggling to compete on the world market. We produce for our own consumption, so we need tariffs and subsidies, and even what you call trade distorting subsidies, to stimulate to have a production at all for our own consumption. So I just want to take in the perspective that not all subsidies are bad, even though they are trade distorting. I mean, we give a lot of subsidies also for environmental goods, and we need also to have a livestock production, because in many parts of the country we can't produce vegetables or fruits. So I wonder how we balance out this, because the saying in WTO is more that you have to cut subsidies and tariffs, and that will be more sustainable. But for the production locally in Norway, it's kind of the other way around, because we need the subsidies and the tariffs to be able to produce in a manner where we also have less emissions of CO2, as you mentioned, compared to Switzerland. So we are afraid that we will just export the production to somewhere else where maybe the emissions are bigger. So how do you find a kind of a balance between these kinds of productions, and you keep up a production in the whole world and not only in the country?
So I'm from the Swiss Farmers Union. My question is a bit similar, but we talk a lot about what can farmers do differently to save the planet, but it's important to finance all these actions, because the market is not paying it at the moment, right? And then we come to the subsidies and to WTO ministerial conference discussions, and often I hear this idea we should shift subsidies to the green box, and Switzerland used the green box a lot, but sometimes we have to focus on the minimal standard, and the minimal standard we can reach increase by law. So we make an obligation for all farmers to do something, and then we should not give green box money for an incentive anymore. We should just give a subsidy, and this subsidy by WTO terms is called trade distorting. So we need both. We have to pull with green box subsidies for specific developments, but we also have to push with broad subsidies for lifting the whole bottom line. That's this we should keep in mind. Otherwise, we will not have the enough impact if we do not both. So how you see that? What is your opinion on this shifting?
I'm originally from New Zealand, but I'm not going to say anything. Go ahead, David.
Excuse me.
So we are in a situation that today markets are imperfect because we don't pay for carbon, we don't pay for biodiversity. So thinking that free markets are going to get an optimal allocation is wrong, because what we do is we optimize economically, and that's what markets are good. But if there is missing market, in some case, more free trade is going to reduce emission, because actually we are shifting production from regions that are today are inefficient to regions that are more efficient. You look tomato produced in Morocco, they have a lower carbon footprint than tomato produced in Europe, and even when you take into account transportation elements. So here it's better for climate to do basically tomato where you have sun. And now for Morocco they export water for their tomato, and because water is not priced, for them actually it's more costly. So you know, when we talk about liberalizing, for example, this, the country that should be more worried about should be tobacco and not Europe from an environmental point of view. So here my point is we need more evidence. We need to have an actual discussion based on that. Now, what we have seen also, and I think that today the concern in Europe is pretty obvious, is during the last 15 years, a lot of policies was about reducing traditional productivity gains.
Reducing them.
Reducing, yes. Productivity gains have slowed down because we are looking at other things. We are looking at sustainability. But traditional productivity gains was about cutting production costs. So during especially the 2000, people are reducing production costs. So even when prices were going down, they were able to survive. Today prices went down, but their production costs have continued to increase because we have saved other things. But that is not paid by anyone. So saving overall water, biodiversity, or carbon is not bringing money to farmers. Good for the society. So the society is happy. We are reducing the social cost. We are not reducing the private cost. And that creates a tension. And so that's where the subsidies normally should start to kick in. This other payment scheme. Because someone has to pay for this. You know? If we say carbon as a cost, and if someone saves carbon, we have to pay for that. But that's not what we have done at scale. Because also, people say, oh, we have to operate at constant budget. So we want the agri-food system to do more, to do better, but at constant budget. No. In one of my slides, when I was saying, okay, today we have at least 10 trillion of hidden costs of the agri-food system, solving them will cost money. People say maybe not 10 trillion, but at least 3-4 additional trillions. This money will have to come from somewhere. In some cases, you can as a consumer to pay for it. But the cost of food is more important for poor people than for rich people, even in Europe. So you cannot say today, oh, we are doubling the cost of food in order that the consumer pay for everything we need. That will not work. So that's where the taxpayers still have to be there. So what it means that, yes, we will need some transfer, and that will be subsidies. They can be green box, you know, or they can be blue box. I mean, in some cases, the blue box has been a bit neglected, but if you need to control the amount of emission, so you need to control the amount of livestock, for example, that's a way, and you can still favor some intensification in that sense. But having subsidies that say to people, the more you produce, the more money you have, not at all the solution we want. Because you can have good production and bad production. I would say even within one country, you see a lot of heterogeneity among farmer practices. You have farmers that have already adopted, and something we also need to pay them, because then you have the situation where we are paying only for the people that are going to change things, but the people that have already changed things doesn't have payments. And say, why? I was the first adopter, I'm already producing clean, and you are just paying the guy that was dirty until yesterday to do things. So really we need to rethink how we design this type of payment in order to pay for what we consider public goods, like biodiversity, like emission. So that I said, the green box can still be a way, assuming that there's still a future for the green box, because other countries say, we have to rethink all of this specification because there's greenwashing. And the green box doesn't mean that it's green in the sense that we want here. So I'm not, but I don't want to replace here the trade negotiators that are fighting to design a system that is still difficult to navigate. But right now, the rules we have and the design we have allow to do a lot of things, but may not be the way to incentivize the best thing. Now, in terms of trade policy,
Quickly.
yes, that's where we have some countries that are highly protectionist, mainly for their political economy reason, because they still want to get production at home. Based on this discussion now is to which extent this production at home is really cleaner than the one you have outside. And I think it has to be science-based. And I think potentially from even WTO talk is we need to bring transparency on that, not just I say so or I think so. And in the same way with the Codex Alimentarius, we have some clarification about where we start to have a protectionist measure versus a non-protectionist measure. And basically we don't ask the WTO to take decision on this, but we have a body with different countries hosted by FAO where we define that on a number of environmental aspects. We may need something like the Codex to have a system where we can say, yes, these norms make sense, and I apply them, and I am protected. Now, for the tariffs per se, that's where, do we put a price on carbon, and all the discussion on the carbon border adjustment mechanism, that's it. But Norway is a small market, so I don't think that many people, but the fact that just to say, we need to have production at home because, and we need a high tariff because we are not competitive, not really solving the problem of the environmental aspect. If now we show that we need these high prices to pay for the good practices, that can be part of the solution. But actually, people will say, you can do transfer. You can use subsidies to pay for this difference.
To pay for the benefit.
Yes. The tariffs are still a bit
It's another issue.
sensitive. I understand the situation in Norway, but it's also the production costs are very high in Norway.
Yeah, that's why we need subsidies and tariffs.
Yeah, but I would say when we know that we have trade, so you can want to get protectionism for other reasons, but if your only argument is because we have high production costs, people will say, yes, but when you have high production costs in any sectors, you have to phase out. If you don't want, it's for other reasons.
But then you don't get food security, you don't get production.
And this is a discussion
National
that we're
food
going to have to
security.
continue over lunch. Speaking of food security. Speaking of food security. That's all we have time for. David, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I feel much smarter now than I did an hour ago. So that was great. I even know what lens bearing is. Thank you very much all for joining us. Thank you, David.